and a very good day to our distinguished guests, including our political dignitaries, religious leaders who have already left, my dear Sri Lankan brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Nikhila, for that introduction. I think you told my whole history there. I would like to thank Dr. Rasika Subasinghan and USLA committee for inviting me to deliver this keynote speech. It is indeed a great honor. As mentioned in the intro, yes, I was the president of USLA in the mid-90s. And we started doing our events here in Mount Albert because I live just around the corner on Alexis Avenue. So and it's nice to see that it's continuing here. At that time, the Member of Parliament for Mount Albert was Honorable Helen Clark. And we had a mayor at that time, Mr. Frank Ryan. And there was another very special person in Mount Albert, late Mr. Jack Turner, who was the former chairman of Turners and Growers, who was also a member of the Baptist church over there. We were allowed to use their facilities to have our monthly coffee afternoons and language classes, which were started at that time. And it's nice to see that they're going online now for Sinhalese classes. Mr. Turner often spoke very highly of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, as we all know, is a beautiful island paradise in the heart of the Indian Ocean. We never created it, we simply inherited it. It has a long history and had several ancient kings. The foreign colonization started with Portuguese in 1505, then the Dutch, and finally the British, until the independence 75 years ago. That's what we are celebrating here today. However, during those 75 years, the country has gone through a roller coaster with the dark era of civil war for 30 years, tropical storms, floods, a tsunami, and the outbreak of pandemic. Today, Sri Lanka faces a dire economic crisis and political instability. While it looks bleak now, I would like to think that this too shall pass. It requires a special leadership that could transform the current chaos into some order. We all have a part to play in this journey. As the late J.F. Kennedy once famously said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Although many of us are New Zealanders, I know our hearts are there and we are willing to extend a helping hand when needed. I was just 3 years old when Ceylon, at that time was known, gained independence. As I grew up and started school, I remember well the respect we had for our first Prime Minister, late Honorable D.S. Senanayake. There was no TV at that time. We got to see his picture in the newspapers and heard about him on the radio. At that time, I grew in a house which did not have electricity. So it was either through battery-operated radio or rediffusion that we heard the news. I remember how sad I felt hearing about his death. He had fallen off a horse and died the following day. I was 7 years old, and my mother took me to the Parliament building to pay our last respects, a memory I was able to recall while watching Queen Elizabeth's funeral on TV just last year. Following the death of D.S. Senanayake, Ceylon had several leaders, including Mrs. Sirimavo Bandaranaike, who made history in 1960 by becoming the very first woman Prime Minister in the world. Our own ex-Prime Minister, Ms. Jacinda Ardern, also made history by leading New Zealand through some challenging events over the past 5.5 years and also becoming a mother during that time. She led the country with kindness and empathy. To quote her, "We need our leaders to be able to empathize with the circumstances of others, to empathize with the next generation that we are making decisions on behalf of." I wish the Sri Lankan leaders would learn a lesson from her. Women around the world are breaking glass ceilings and coming to the forefront because of education. Quality education and gender equality are two of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. In Sri Lanka, we have had equal opportunity to receive free education all the way till we graduated from university, something that most of us here are grateful for. This is reflected through a high literacy rate. It is also true among the Sri Lankan immigrants in New Zealand. Most of those who came here in the 1970s were doctors. Now there are more professionals here with engineering, accountancy, IT, banking, hospitality, food and agriculture-based qualification, like in our case. I did my first degree in agriculture, as was mentioned, in the 1960s. I'm very grateful for that strong foundation on which my whole international career got built. Last year, as was mentioned, I was fortunate enough to receive 2 prestigious awards in the food sector, one national and one international. In my acceptance speech, I said that the awards were like icing on the cake, but the cake was baked back home in Sri Lanka. I gave due credit to the late Honorable Lakshman Kadiragama, who mentioned in his Oxford Union address in 2005 that he was a cake baked back home in Sri Lanka. There are so many Sri Lankan baked cakes around the world. They are doing good work in their respective fields to build wealth for their adopted nations and getting the icing there. I feel sad when I think what a loss it is for our native land. Right now, our own people are going through hardships. Some are even starving due to series of mistakes and poor governance by some political leaders. The governance strategy should be to make the leaders accountable for their actions. The UN Human Rights Chief pointed out that impunity for human rights abuses, economic crimes, and corruption as the main underlying reason for countries' collapse. Sri Lanka needs a change in the system. Last year, protests known as the Aragalaya awakened all Sri Lankans to realize the dangerous state they have been driven into by their leaders pretending to be their protectors. The Sri Lankans united across ethnicities and faiths to stand against corruption and incompetence in government. It reaffirmed the line in our national anthem, Eka Mavakage Daru Kala Bebina, meaning as children of one mother. This marks a watershed in the recent history of Sri Lanka. The country needs to maintain unity and work towards elimination of corruption, theft, and waste to achieve the sustainable economy that is needed to move forward. Every nation in the world has suffered terribly because of the pandemic, although Sri Lanka's crisis began a year prior with the Easter bombing and continues with the economic crisis. While its economy struggles with the brain drain of unprecedented proportions, we have hope that the youth that led the protests will be the engine of growth and a future for Sri Lanka through their entrepreneurship and the startup opportunities that are emerging. Sri Lanka is so rich in potential, having human and natural resources that align perfectly through our culture, hospitality, agricultural produce, technical and artistic skills. Our motherland maintains her dignity because of this. However, she now needs a visionary leader to clean up the mess and rebuild the nation. I wish I could be there to help. But I wonder whether Conrad will be happy to see me go, although he was very supportive when I went to Tanzania on a PSA assignment, volunteer service abroad, for 2 years initially. Then later I went twice more on 3 assignments in total. There were several projects that I did in Tanzania, and some family and friends from Sri Lanka who visited me asked me why I wouldn't do this in Sri Lanka. I too asked that question myself. I wish there was a VSA program in Sri Lanka. I would be the first one to sign up. I also wish that New Zealand had a bilateral agreement with Sri Lanka to let retired people like me go there with full superannuation without the 6-month time limit. As a bonus, this policy might free up some houses and solve the accommodation problem. That might be something to work on. I raised this topic at one of our Zoom meetings organized by Honorable Manushi Walters, who has graced us here by her presence. I'm aware that the New Zealand-Sri Lanka Business Council is looking into expanding trade opportunities between our 2 countries. Currently, it's mainly tea coming from there and dairy products from here. Some processed foods are imported and sold through Sri Lankan retail shops here. With the New Zealand High Commission well established in Sri Lanka, hopefully we will be able to explore the possibility of importing some fresh produce like mango, banana and pineapple to New Zealand. However, those products require phytosanitary protocols to be established between the 2 countries. It is the sincere wish of the Sri Lankans that our motherland would once again become that resplendent isle. There are several Sri Lankan organizations in New Zealand trying to preserve the culture and traditions for the next generations. When Conrad and I first came to New Zealand in 1981, there was the New Zealand-Sri Lanka Friendship Society based in Wellington. We lived in Masterton at that time, and Conrad was the Wairarapa representative. Then we moved to Auckland in mid-80s. USLA was formed at the height of civil war in Sri Lanka. Around the mid-90s, a diverse group of Sri Lankans in Auckland met, and that led to the formation of the New Zealand-Sri Lanka Foundation. It was inaugurated in exactly 25 years ago. I was elected the president, as was mentioned earlier. In my acceptance speech as the first president of the foundation, I recited a poem that I composed. I would like to conclude my keynote speech by sharing with you a few verses of that poem titled Like Threads in a Lace. Our life is a journey that we travel through, meeting and leaving many as we do, people and places, including where we grew as children of a country that we once belonged to. As a group or as individuals, we all can do our part to enrich and bear new fruits too, that can be enjoyed by the citizens of two countries that link through this union so true. As a group that is committed to enrich this place, let us all now unite, irrespective of race and creed, that we follow in our own personal ways, yet blend in the beauty like threads in a lace.